All right, let's talk about one of the most violent, widespread, and honestly forgotten events in all of American history. It's an event that truly set the stage for the country we live in today. This is the story of the Great Upheaval of 1877. I mean, that sounds like a crazy question, right? A 10% pay cut? How could something like that push an entire nation just a decade after the Civil War right back to the absolute brink of total collapse?
Well, for 45 absolutely terrifying days, that's exactly what happened. This wasn't just some strike. This was a full-blown national insurrection. What we're going to break down here is how the chaos of that summer became the brutal birth of modern industrial conflict in the United States. It basically forged a brand new and incredibly violent template for the relationship between corporations, their workers, and the government itself.
So, how on earth did things get so bad? Well, it wasn't just one thing. You got to think of Gilded Age America, that era of explosive industrial growth and mind-boggling wealth inequality, as a tinderbox. It was packed with three highly flammable ingredients, just waiting for a single spark.
Ingredient number one, extreme economic desperation. Back in 1873, a financial panic kicked off what historians call the Long Depression. And get this, at 65 months, it was actually longer than the Great Depression we all learn about from the 1930s. Unemployment skyrocketed, and millions of people were facing total ruin.
Ingredient number two was unchecked corporate power. And here's the thing about all that economic pain. It was not being shared equally, not even close. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, the company right at the heart of our story, kept cutting wages, saying, "Oh, it's the bad economy." But at the very same time, they were making darn sure their stockholders got a fat 10% dividend. Now, for a railroad brakeman who had one of the most dangerous jobs in the country, this wasn't some abstract number on a page. Imagine your monthly paycheck getting slashed from around $70 all the way down to $30. I mean, you're not just struggling, you're on the absolute edge of starvation. And you can just feel that desperation in their own words. One B&O worker put it in this absolutely heartbreaking way. Quote, "We come home, find our children gnawing bones." And that brings us to the third and final ingredient, the absolutely brutal reality of their day-to-day lives. Railroad work was unbelievably dangerous. We're talking death and serious injury as just a normal part of the job. And if you got hurt, too bad, no compensation. Your workdays could stretch to 18 hours. The companies made you pay for your own food and lodging on the road, which sometimes costs more than you even earned on the trip. And then, to top it all off, they introduced double headers, basically doubling the workload and the danger for no extra pay. These guys had literally nothing left to lose. So you've got desperation, you've got corporate greed, and you've got horrific working conditions. And then, in July of 1877, the B&O announces another 10% pay cut. That was the spark. The tinderbox just exploded. And what started as a small local walkout in a tiny West Virginia town turned into a national war. The strike spread like, well, wildfire, as fast as a telegraph could carry the news. It kicks off in Martinsburg, West Virginia on July 14th. Then, boom, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Chicago, St. Louis. City after city, the rails shut down and the streets erupted into bloody battles. Just look at these death tolls. This was absolute chaos on a national scale. But right in the middle of all this chaos, something really fascinating started to happen. A pattern emerged. When state governors called out the local militias to go break the strikes, those militiamen, well, they were the friends, neighbors, and sometimes even fellow workers of the strikers, and they refused to fire on them. They sided with their own communities. And this right here really breaks it down for you. You had two forces. On one side, the local guys, the community members, who totally sympathized with the workers. But on the other, you had these outside forces, like militia brought in from a rival city like Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, who had zero connection to the town and were just there to do the company's dirty work. And this is the absolute key. The arrival of these outsiders was the direct trigger for the worst of the mass violence. Because when those outside troops showed up, the result wasn't law and order. It was a massacre. In Pittsburgh, the Philadelphia militia fired into a crowd, killing men, women, and children. The city just exploded in rage. Citizens fought back, and they burned the entire Pennsylvania Railroad complex to the ground. It was an apocalyptic scene. So, with local and state forces either unwilling or unable to crush the rebellion, the railroad barons went straight to the top. They demanded a stronger response. And this is the moment the conflict transforms, leading to a powerful and terrifying unification of corporate power and federal military power. Now, to really get what happens next, you need to know about this one little piece of political context, the Compromise of 1877. It was basically this shady backroom deal that made Rutherford B. Hayes president. And what was the price? He had to agree to pull the last of the federal troops out of the South, which officially ended the era of Reconstruction. Okay, now check out the timing here, because it is wild. Just weeks after those federal troops were pulled out of the South, where their mission had been, at least on paper, to protect the civil rights of newly freed African Americans, they were immediately redeployed to the North. And what was their new mission? Protecting the property of railroad corporations. I mean, this was a massive, fundamental shift in what the U.S. Army was used for. And unlike the local militias, the professional soldiers of the U.S. Army, they were disciplined. They followed orders without question, and city by city, they moved in with overwhelming force, breaking the picket lines, seizing the rail yards, and crushing the uprising. And what did the workers get for all this bloodshed? Nothing. The companies made basically no concessions. This quote from an anonymous striker just says it all, the grim, simple reality of how it ended. We were shot back to work. So, the strike was a total, crushing defeat on the ground. End of story, right? Not even close. Its legacy was actually incredibly complex and kind of paradoxical. It launched a whole new chapter in the American class war. On the one hand, the wealthy and powerful fortified their position. The National Guard was reorganized to be a professional strike-breaking force. They built these huge, fortress-like armories right in the middle of working-class neighborhoods as a constant show of force. Corporations even got the green light to create their own private police. But here's the paradox. That brutal defeat turned out to be the greatest recruitment tool the labor movement could have ever dreamed of. Workers learned a hard lesson. Acting alone, locally, was no match for the combined power of big business and the federal government. They had to get organized on a national level, and boy did they. The Knights of Labor, one of the big unions of the day, saw its membership explode from just a few thousand to over 700,000 people. So yeah, you could say the strikers lost the Battle of 1877. They were, in their own powerful words, shot back to work. But in that very defeat, they unleashed something new and powerful into the world, an idea of national solidarity, of class consciousness, that would completely reshape the fight for the soul of industrial America for the next half-century.